still relying on general fund subsidies and having pretty substantial rates in what they result in. Um, we also had direction about debt financing CIP projects to the extent possible. Some things don't really qualify to be debt financed, but a very substantial portion of the capital projects do. So having the debt proceeds is in the models, and the amount of the debt service expense for repayment of those is in. We also had instruction to delay CIP projects whenever possible. So I think Sean went through the list at least five. I think it's been more than five times that he's gone through the list and reviewed and tried to identify, are there things that can be delayed? And it's a dynamic situation where things are constantly changing and things come up, and there's been projects that's like, oh, we thought this could be delayed and now it needs to be moved up, but these other projects that we thought needed to be done sooner can be delayed. So it's a shifting around of both directions in some cases. One of the things that was requested to minimize and eliminate general fund subsidies and cash loans and to build in repayment. As we talk on the next slide, we still will be having general fund subsidies because of some of the decisions that have been made. And then also there was a request to wait on implementing a water resource fee until there was new water resource costs incurred, which this is a long path on the rate study and when rates will be effective. So we are anticipating that there will likely be some water resource costs by the time that this is implemented anyway. Some of the things that have been refined since the April 3rd work session. So the April 3rd work session, we had kind of a combination. We had multiple projects going on at the same time, looking at the long-range forecast for the general fund, some preliminary information on the utility rate study, and debt financing information. Since that time, we have adopted the fiscal year 26 budget, so that put some of those numbers locked in that were very preliminary back at that point in time. In the budget process, we estimate for what was then the current fiscal year, which was fiscal year 25, so those estimates were updated. But a couple of things that I had alluded to earlier, we made some very significant decisions on our dedications of our TPT. So there was the half-cent spur cross sales tax that the dedication said that after the cost to cover what was needed for maintaining Spur Cross, then there was 100,000 would go to trails, and then the remainder would be split 50-50 between the general fund and the water infrastructure fund, which is essentially Cave Creek Water. We eliminated that dedication, and that kind of got changed around a bit, but the portion that was being dedicated to Cave Creek Water, we said, no, we don't want to do that. We want to have more flexibility, understanding that that meant that the general fund was going to have to continue to subsidize for a while longer. There was also the half-cent sales tax that was dedicated to the wastewater fund. The way it was written, it was for the utilities, water and sewer, but because the wastewater was in the most financial need of that money, that's where it had been going. And that was eliminated as far as the dedication. And again, we had discussions at that time that meant that we would need to replace that with general fund subsidy for quite a while. So those are some fairly significant things that happened. Also, as I mentioned, so we did look at the CIP projects and shifted things around. And even since the fiscal year 26 budget adoption, we have continued to look at the CIP projects and what can shift around. And so there's been adjustments there as well. We did look at what was determined as far as growth. In the Integrated Utility Master Plan, they were looking at an average of growth over a very long time period. But in the short run, we're not seeing that type of growth. And so what was originally based off of the Integrated Master Plan and the 2.5% growth every year, year after year after year, that was in there, we said that's not realistic. And so we really only looked at things that we knew were coming along in the near future. And then we also looked again at debt service reserves for the WIFA loans. Um, when we did that, um, the way the debt service reserves work, it's what's called a times coverage requirement, where you have to have a certain number of times of your revenue compared to what your debt service cost is. Well, we were in this spot when we were looking at the model where in order to get to the 1.5 times of revenues compared to what the debt service was, in a couple of the funds, we were building fund balance, but having to contribute significant amounts of general fund money because the revenues on an annual basis were not meeting the 1.5 times. And to me, that didn't make sense. It's cheaper to basically say, okay, we're going to meet the minimum of the 1.2, which is required to even get the debt service, and fund the reserves, because you do a one-time funding of the reserve and then it's there and you're not continually putting in general fund money in that revenue calculation. Questions so far?
Yeah, and you said that we expect we're probably going to have to pay some money to find water, so you couldn't calculate that in. And also with the cutbacks in water coming from CAP, which we anticipate, is that something that you were able to integrate in this?
Um, so we did build in estimates based off of information that we were finding as time was going along, um, to identify costs for water resources. And so those are built in. We have a couple different scenarios for you that we'll be going through, but there is scenario with the water resources in there.
If we have a reduction in the water deliveries, that means that we're going to be getting probably a reduction in income coming in from the water
Um,
supply to customers.
well, that's presuming some things, because um, there's a whole plan that's being worked on of how we address the water resources. And so if we're saying we need a plan for assuming that we're not going to have enough water for everybody that is current customers, we didn't think that that was a viable scenario to work from.
It's impossible.
We have a temporary sources of water, so there is no water shortage
That's
in
true.
the
I'm
next
sorry.
3-4
Right.
years.
Okay.
This is the water that's being banked with CAP, thanks to the vice mayor.
Good point.
And conservation programs should help out, and the water wells should help out. We're putting new water wells in, so we don't want to get anybody excited that we're not going to have water. We have water.
Right.
Thank you, Mayor.
Right. Some of the things that we are proposing in the updates to the rate structure. So originally in the water usage rates, the lowest tier was from 0 to 10,000 gallons. And we are proposing using 0 to 4,000 gallons, which will help those who use less water. It's kind of a lifeline type tier to kind of help people out. And it also helps with incentives for water conservation, which is one of the things that we're hoping to achieve, which is also part of a little bit higher escalation in the cost for water usage over the 50,000 gallons compared to the way it was calculated previously. And as I mentioned, we do have separate scenarios based off of water resources, and do we have separate fees? Do we not have separate fees? Okay.
Yes, Mayor.
Go good. Yeah.
Just a comment. I guess it's a rewards program for individuals who can run a household under a certain number to have a financial credit. But the practical effect of this is that second homeowners, who would be the primary beneficiaries who live elsewhere part of the year, puts more of the burden on the full-time residents of Cave Creek with this type of proposal, it would seem.
That could possibly be true. This is on a monthly basis. But I don't have enough information for you on like those that have second homes of what kind of outdoor water usage is ongoing, whether they're there or not. In a lot of cases there would be, because when there's outdoor water usage, it becomes fairly substantial and would be over that 4,000.
Well, full-time residents, most likely all would be over 4,000, but part-time
Mm.
residents
No,
would probably benefit from this.
I think we may use less than 4,000.
Maybe
In
the
some-
exception, not having a house full of kids and a pool. is
Yeah, right.
Stuff like that.
Right.
I just want to make that note that,
Yeah, but there's some that don't actually use outdoor water usage, don't have irrigation systems, don't have.
well, it's
pumps.
a pay benefit for those who can stay under 4,000, but it probably won't be statistically that significant of the majority of the residents.
It's actually quite a lot of the residents are under
Under
4,000. Mhm.
Do we know?
We were a little surprised at how much that was. For Cave Creek Water, about 34% of the customers are, within that 4,000.
So if a third of the residents are under 4,000, then under this proposal, how much money do you have to make up to pay for the operation?
We'll be going through information on the rates
Okay.
and how that impacts it.
But it's a good question. What is the strategy for reducing from 10,000 gallons a month to 4,000?
Do you want to explain like how you came?
Yeah, so when we look at the rate, so it'll tell us, as we complete the study, it'll tell us how much revenue we need to generate from the residential class. It'll tell us how much revenue we need to generate from the commercial class, the different classes. So then that's our starting point, and then we've got the base charge that gets assessed every month regardless of how much water is used.
Hmm.
So the approach that we've always taken in Cave Creek is that roughly 50% of the revenue needs to come from the base charge. So we've maintained approximately 50% of revenue is coming from the base, which then means the remaining 50% needs to come from the volume component. So we've done an analysis, and Sherry touched on it a little bit here, that tells us how much water use is in each of these tiers. If we go from 10,000 gallons, if we drop that from 0 to 4, how much falls in the 0 to 4 category, how much falls in this 5 to 10, et cetera. So we plug that in, and then we look at the individual rates themselves, and it becomes a little bit of a balancing act. So the higher we make the first tier rate, then the lower the remaining rates will need to be in order to generate the revenue that we need. The lower we make that first tier, then we, as you're pointing out, we need to make up that revenue from the other tiers. So then we play a little bit more in how aggressive do we want to be in that top tier in terms of generating more revenue from them, knowing that that's the highest rate, is more discretionary. So probably people are going to be scaling back. We'll get some conservation. So we don't want to entirely rely on all of the revenue coming from that. So what's the sweet spot, if you will, where we do a balancing and try and mitigate what the average ratepayer is going to pay in terms of their bill, giving a little bit of a break to the lower volume users, making it up on the higher end users.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
And I realized I did not introduce Kevin, and I know you all know Kevin, but there are probably other people in the room, and I don't know if people online watching that may not know him, but this is Kevin Burnett with Wildan, who has been for several years working on rate studies for the town. So he's very familiar with our structure and what we're trying to achieve.
All right, so with that, we'll start to get into some of the numbers. So what we have here, so as Sherry alluded to, we have 3 different plans for the Cave Creek water utility side of things. So this is the first one we have, which is not going out and seeking additional water resources. So the water resources have been excluded from this capital improvement program. So this is kind of a status quo, if you will, in terms of the water resources that we have. So you can see what the rate increases that we've got projected from 25-26, so this current fiscal year, through 2033, 2034. And then you can see the general fund subsidies that's projected as well. 2024, 25 is already in the book, so that happened last fiscal year. And then we've got anticipated general fund subsidy in 25, 26, and again in 26, 27.
If I could just add, so this scenario is helpful because if we want to do a water resource fee as a separate charge, knowing what the costs are and what we need for the system prior to the water resources is this scenario.
So then our next scenario, so this includes water resources. So under this scenario, we have not designed a separate water resource fee that would be dedicated to funding the cost of the water resources we would be acquiring. So you can see in this case, there's going to be much more significant general fund subsidy throughout the entire 10-year period that we're looking at, and the rates themselves also are higher. The rate increases themselves are also higher under this scenario as compared to the previous one without.
So, sorry, Kevin,
Yep.
but could you just reiterate your preface? This is based on if we have to acquire more.
If you have to
water.
acquire additional water resources, and we're relying on funding just through the current rate structure itself and then general fund loans. We have not developed a new impact fee for water resources. We have not included a new water resource specific fee. The rate structure as it stands today, plus general fund loans to cover the cost of water resources.
What inflation rate did you use and what's driving the increase if these rates are in fact higher than the inflation rate?
It's the cost of the water resources themselves and then the debt service on the water resources are assumed to be debt funded. So it's the incremental debt service and the debt service coverage that Sherry was discussing earlier is what's driving up the rates under this scenario.
One of the other things in the way that this is approached, because what CIP costs are today, which is how budgets are developed, are not necessarily what they're going to be 10 years from now or even 2 years from now. So there's also the inflationary factors on the CIP as well that's built
So
in.
these are not real dollars as you go out in the future.
Their estimates.
They're estimates, but yes, they're going to be wrong. The further we get away from today, the more incorrect they'll be.
And maybe I didn't hear you, but how much are you estimating for water acquisition?
So we had about 11 million
Okay,
in fiscal year 26.
okay.
On the previous chart, in the outer years, you showed %.
Mm-hmm.
At what point, and do I read this as 27, 28, that subsidies would be phased out?
Correct. There would be no subsidies anticipated based on what we know today, starting in that year.
Okay, and then we know, we've heard some numbers from Sean and others about projects that are deferred currently, but they're critical infrastructure improvements. Does the end of the subsidization jive with what we know to be upcoming costs for infrastructure improvements and so forth? In other words, what I'm asking is, I don't know how we could go to 5 to 4% in future years with the amount of deferred expenditures on the two water companies, actually. How is that?
So there was a lot of deferral of some of the projects, but this scenario says all the various CIP projects that were related to water resources. So there was a variety of things that was involved in the 10-year plan that was related to water resources. So taking all of those projects out so that we had a baseline of if we didn't need water resources, where would we be?
Well, that sounds like kind of a rhetorical exercise. If we have a list of what we know that we need to be prepared to spend money on, why would we remove those from the time period indicating where the subsidization phases out?
You're talking about like CIP projects that are being delayed? Yeah, we didn't do multiple scenarios of, okay, well, if we have enough money, we'll advance these CIP projects. It's consistent amongst all the various scenarios of how we have the CIP laid out.
But Tom, we have the next 3 years, we're phasing out of the original cost of the system. And so the debt service drops off dramatically. If we don't borrow more
Correct.
money, it drops off dramatically. But borrowing money keeps the rates down for our residents. And that's it's fair too, because if you put in an improvement today that's going to last for 20 years, well, the people 20 years from now should pay a portion of that. And that's how this is set up when you borrow. So
Well, when the town.
it's a fairness
Is it
issue.
being paid by general fund or ratepayers?
It's in these numbers here.
Yeah, so for a while, it's general fund having to help subsidize that,
Right.
but then under this scenario, it would go away. But I would also add to that, as I said, we've got very dynamic circumstances going on, and so I have a slide much later on where was going to say, like, I really feel like we should really only be looking at what should we be charging in rate increases over the next 2, 3 years, and be like fairly close to the heels of completing this one, of really starting the next one, because of just how much is being changed in all of this. So we're trying to look at, okay, well, where would things be on a long-term scenario? But things are changing like sometimes daily, at least weekly. And even after we're at a point where it's like we have to freeze numbers because we have to be able to have this session. We have a timeline, like the timeline that we're on, we would not be able to have the rates be effective until February. And the longer we wait, the longer it takes before we start collecting that additional revenue. So we had to say, we got to freeze numbers. And there's still additional things that were coming up of like, well, there's going to be this in the future and there's going to be that in the future. And I'm like, we got to move. Like if we keep stopping for every single change, we're never going to get this done. I don't know. I think the mayor said something about we took multiple years on one of the rate studies, probably because things kept changing.
Hey, Bob, remind us of the numbers that we no longer have to pay when the first expenditure is paid off in 3 years.
Well, it started out at $63 million back when the town had a general fund revenue, probably 5 or 6. I mean, we were just
So what's the number we're roughly down to?
uh, 20 million, something like that, of the original numbers. It's somewhere around 20. Every July, it goes down another 5, roughly.
Yeah, in total across all of the utilities.
Across the 3 utilities.
Yeah.
So when that's paid off, the amount of money we're currently spending per year is roughly, how much do we save, I guess is what I'm asking in that note specifically.
So
But-
the scenarios take that into consideration of the debt that's being paid off, but also this is building in all future CIP projects that can be debt financed will be debt financed. So we're putting debt financing back in.
Okay, so it never,
as well.
the initial project ends.
Yeah.
But then the new project
project.
begins.
Yeah,
Correct.
we're in a big problem, okay, because everything is in the next 2 to 3 years. Our water issues in the next 2 to 3 years. We've got the Phoenix Interconnect going right now. So we are in the worst cash flow that we're going to be in. The future as far as the debt stuff is somewhat rosy. But now we have the fact that there's a water crisis that's 14 months away, and we still don't know how much water we're going to have or what we're going to do. We've got contingency plans, so we're not going to have a shortage, but we've got to deal with those issues, as the whole state does.
There's a lot of unknowns in all this that we're just guessing.
What do you estimate the number would have been in 24-25 without the subsidy? How much would that have impacted ratepayer rates?
If we said no subsidy in fiscal year 25 rates would have had to increase an additional X amount over how much they did increase. Just looking at the numbers here, I don't know, like probably like at least 8,
Yeah, I would say at least 8.
maybe more.
Thanks.
$1 million is a $28 per month on an average. $1 million per year is $28 per month if you fund. So if you need $1 million worth of revenue, you got to put $28 of rates in to cover that $1 million. That's just a rule of thumb number.
With the current number of ratepayers?
With 4,400,
Yeah.
with 44, that, I don't think that's probably, is that just residential or is that all custom? Yeah, it's just a rough
Yeah.
number to get some perspective.
Since you asked that question, what is the number of commercial ratepayers we have? Or am I jumping too far ahead?
Do you know that off the top of your head, Sean?
About 10% of our accounts, under 10% is commercial, non-residential.
You know,
I have the percentage.
So 450 or 440?
I think 4,400 total accounts,
440?
4,400.
Oh. Right.
Let me ask a dumb question. Do they pay the same rates as residential? Or are they
No.
charged differently,
Differently.
more or less?
It's coming up. It's on one of the
Okay.
slides.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're going to be going through all those details.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I really, for the people in the room, you really ought to explain that this is not our calculation technique. This is a nationally accepted way that you do. Kevin, take it from there.
Yeah, so there are industry standards. The American Water Works Association has outlines of how the financial plan should be developed. Your bondholders will tell you you need to have the 1.20 times debt service coverage. Those are all industry legal guidelines that we need to follow. So we follow that perspective in terms of developing the financial plan. You're an enterprise fund. So as an enterprise fund, you're permitted to cover your operating costs. So your O&M, your CIP, your debt service. You're permitted to set aside reserves, whether it be an operating reserve for emergencies or a debt service reserve, depending upon how your bond is structured. You're not permitted to make a profit. So as we develop the financial plans, we develop plans that generate the revenue that you need, the adequate reserves. Sometimes municipalities, utilities will be planning a major capital project down the road, so they'll start building up reserves ahead of that. That's permitted. As I said, you're not allowed to generate a profit as part of this. And then there are industry guidelines in how we assign costs to different customer classes, how we design rates. The rates need to be equitable. They need to be proportionate to the cost that customer X places on the system. The rates that we assess that customer have to be proportionate. We can't just arbitrarily choose to penalize this customer versus this customer. So the industry has guidelines that tell us how we need to do these. So yes, it's an industry approach. All the data that we use is Cave Creek specific. So we're not taking Carefree's information and building your rates on that. We're not taking Gilbert's information and building your rates on that. All the information is specific to Cave Creek and the Desert Hills systems, but it is governed by national standards that are in the industry and have been in the industry for over 100 years at this point.
Yeah, very good.
And then one of the comments remind me of a clarification I should have made. So there are these 3 different Cave Creek system financial plans here. The growth projections are the same for all 3 systems. The amount of water that's being sold is the same for all 3 systems. The O&M costs are the same for all 3 systems. The water infrastructure itself, the water mains, water pumps, all of that kind of stuff, that's the same for all 3 of these plans. The only difference is the water resource piece. In this case, we don't have the water resource. This second one that we just looked at does include water resource capital. And then the next one we're going to look at includes the water resource capital, but it also develops a dedicated fee for that. So all the other assumptions are the same across these 3 scenarios. It's just the water resource piece that's different. So going back to, so this is the plan with the water resources. So this is where we're at today. As I said, there's general fund subsidies throughout the entire plan. And then on the right-hand side, you can see where we were back in April, before we went back and sharpened pencils and revisited assumptions and had a look at things.
One of the things since April 3rd was estimates for the water resource costs went up. So you'll see that we were at April 3rd, we were thinking by 10 years we would be repaying, and now it's showing that we would not if we're relying only on the monthly service rates.
So you have $11 million of borrowing for the water resource. And so we're looking at what, $700,000 a year or so to cover the
Right.
principal interest on that, spread across on a yearly basis, spread across roughly 4,400. You didn't try to break it down by system or things like that?
No, we did not, because the way that we handle things right now, we sell water from Cave Creek to Desert Hills. So it would be duplicating costs if we charge some of it directly and then build them for the cost as well.
So just before we move on, so we've got 6% increases all down the line and general fund subsidies all down the line under this water resource plan. If we just let the rate structure as it stands today cover the cost of water resources. So then we developed a plan with a water resource fee. So we took that annual debt service that the mayor just alluded to, and we divided that by the amount of water that gets sold in an annual basis, and that came up with a water resource fee of $3.27 per 1,000 gallons. Just based on that high level calculation of what the annual debt service is divided by how much water we sell. So in this plan, if we include that additional $3.27 per 1,000 gallons as a dedicated water resource fee, we still have the 6% all the way down in each year. However, you can see we don't have the same general fund subsidies requirement. We've got some intermediate years between 27, 28 and 2031, 32. Not be any general fund subsidies needed. And then got it picking back up in 2032. So less reliance on the general fund if we have that dedicated water resource fee on top of the existing rates.
Except that if I recall, at the beginning of your presentation, you're actually not recommending that we initiate that water resource fee until we actually have those water resources.
Right.
true?
So yeah, so that was part of what was requested, was that we look at having those start when we start having water resource costs, which may be happening
Right,
anyway. So
right.
It's not clear to me why we go back to subsidies in 32 to 34, the 400.
The mayor mentioned earlier about how with the acquisition systems and the debt that we're paying off, and it's pretty substantial debt. So that actually helps save us for a little while after the first few years when that debt gets paid off. But then as we're continuing to do more projects and debt service grows each year, as we're issuing more and more debt, then we're getting tighter and tighter again back to we'd have to have higher increases in order to be able to cover those costs.
Thank you.
So is the CIP driving these numbers higher? Is that the main driving force?
Largely, yes. The CIP is always going to be the biggest line item in any utility budget.
And I understand that staff has gone through it and changed it.
Yeah, multiple times.
We need to see that. We really do.
So again, according to this chart,
Mhm.
you're estimating that we'll have costs for new water acquisitions by 2027, 28? Am I reading that correctly?
I'm sorry, say that again?
To initiate the water resource fee. According to this chart, am I reading it correctly that you think that that cost will begin in 2027, 28?
No. So this, so you have it started in fiscal year 26, right?
Right.
So it starts in fiscal year 26. The biggest reason why the general fund subsidy drops is because of some very large debt service payments that will drop off because that debt is getting paid off. And so then there'll be some cushion there for a little while, but as we continue to issue more and more debt, then we get there. So
So you are building, if I'm reading this correctly, you're building reserves with general fund money. That seems a little odd and illogical. Why transfer
What-
for the general fund to build a reserve?
we're not building up a reserve.
Look at
We'll
down
be
at the
looking
bottom.
at the financial plans here in just a moment, and you'll see that we're not building up a reserve.
Okay,
Okay, I'm sorry to
No, this is
ask for
good.
clarification yet again. But the water resource fee, is that specifically for new water acquisitions?
No, it's to help cover costs because we're looking at water resources that would help with covering the cuts that we are expecting for current customers.
Okay, but it's not when we get those new water resources. Because I don't think we're going to get any new water resources for another 5 years.
So the way that that's the premise that we used as far as doing the calculations, because that's how we're really going to get the revenue in to be able to help cover this. Because if you do it based off of growth, your collection on covering those costs is going to be much, much longer time period.
Yeah, okay, I understand. Finally.
What's the projected growth, population growth?
We basically backed that out because in the integrated utility master plan, they were estimating an average across the whole period, and I forget how many years it was, 25 years or something like that, of an average of 2.5% over that time frame. So they had that built in on an annual basis, but we're not seeing that kind of growth right now. So we really only added for assumptions of new connections based off of projects that we thought would be coming on board in the
So you
next
think
few
we're
years.
stabilizing, the plan is that we're stabilizing in number of customers.
For right now, that is the a conservative approach on how to address this to make sure that we're addressing what the needs are and setting the rates high enough. And yet even still, we're showing that we would have general fund subsidies even with the rate increases. So if growth comes in, then it's going to help that out. We won't need as much in the general fund subsidies, but I don't foresee it eliminating those general fund subsidies in the first several years.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Because I think the vice mayor had a question that I think it made me have another question. If the water resources are gonna, and you have monies in there around $11 million, well, that money is due first quarter of next year by the town. But if you didn't charge any fee for the resources until such time as the water is deliverable, is that what you're saying?
Right, but we also built in debt service for the water resources as well. And typically you can have some grace period on when you start making those debt service payments. And we can, depending upon what route we go, we can have some flexibility in how those are structured.
The money that's due first quarter is just for the right to punch a hole and drill a well and move the water out when it's available. But there'll be additional cost on top of that. I guess my question is, why would you defer any recognition of the money we're paying out next year?
We're looking at the timeline for this rate study, that rates would not be effective because of the timeline that we have to, that legally we have to follow, that they wouldn't be effective until February. So we wouldn't be able to start charging the fee until
I
February.
don't know, I understand that, but it sounded like it wouldn't be charged for a few years.
No, that's
No,
not what we were anticipating. We were anticipating that
If
if,
the project goes through and you pay the 11 million, the fee would be established.
yes,
And that's because we'll have the debt service. We'll be making the money or having to be making the payment on the debt service. So that's why we need the fee.
Okay.
Even though it may be 2, 3, 5 years before we have access to the
Right.
water,
Okay.
we're still paying for it.
Thank you. You got liberal arts majors out there. Not everybody is engineer or CAP.
but this is kind of a lot art as much as it is science. So, so you got the art side.
All right, so then next up we have is the Desert Hills water system. So you'll notice a terminology change here. So whereas we had general fund subsidy on the Cave Creek side, we're treating it as a general fund loan on the Desert Hills side. So we've got the rate increases that we're projecting on the Desert Hills water. And then we've got the general fund loan, which we're projecting to have fully repaid by 2033, 34. So there's borrowings through 28, 29, 30, 31, sorry. And then beginning 2031, 32, the Desert Hill system will repay the general fund loan over the next 3 years. And then we've got the same side by side. So where we were at the last time we met and then where we're at today based on the changes in the numbers and the new assumptions and scrubbing and what was done between then and now.
I liked April 3rd.
You know, like April 3rd. And then we have Cave Creek wastewater. So again, we're going back to the general fund subsidy. So the loan is only on the Desert Hill side. So back to the Cave Creek side. So we're back to a general fund subsidy. You can see the percentage increases that we have Where we were at previously is where we're at still today. The 6% we had before is where we're at today. But there has been some change in the general fund subsidies. And they're going to be needed in every year based on what we know today.
Is the expansion of the sewer system in here anywhere?
Was the expansion in the first 10 years of the CIP or was that further out?
Not the sewer system.
Sewer.
Yeah, bring on more customers.
Capital program, we're starting the, what we call the first phase of retrofitting existing neighborhoods. It's gonna occur, actually, and since the rate study actually looked at a 10-year CIP, we actually looked into the first and second year. First and second phases into that. The first was supposed to happen starting in 2029, 2030. Second phase would happen a little bit after that. Right now, that's still there. Right now it is.
And so those expansion projects, it doesn't look, well, maybe it does. Does the cash flow from has seen that in a calculation that shows that the cash flow covers, where'd he go? You left the room, I had a great question.
Don't forget it.
Does the cash flow from the rates, does that cover the P&I from borrowing the money to put an expansion in? Has somebody done that economic calculation?
Well, there's also a discussion point we need to make. We brought up during the master plan, if we expand the sewer system, the one thing we have to deal with right now is that there's no requirement for the customers that we'd be going by to actually make a connection until their septic system fails. So I think right now we did not, I don't think we added those extra customer bases. We had to build the sewer system and we actually have to have that discussion. I think we did not add those to the customer base. So we have to have that discussion if we want to change town code right now, because town code does not require them. If we build a sewer system, they're not required to actually make that connection right now.
I don't see how the town, with these numbers, I don't see how the town can cover more. We can't make this problem worse.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's my first comment when I hear this.
Yeah.
Someone else in council can give their opinion, but
Town code did used to say when the town bought the sewer system, that was a requirement that all customers within 300 feet, including residential, had to make a connection, and that was modified probably about 20 years ago to make it only those residential customers who have a failing septic system are required to connect. So we have to go back to the original language to require these people, if we go through the neighborhoods, to make them.
well, see, if you expand the system, somebody's got to pay.
Yeah.
So it's a fairness issue, and we're gonna have to address that because now we got.
The policy.
I'm not sure what sense it makes going out to 2034, but I mean, 2027 is completely opaque with proposed cuts. So
Yeah.
beyond that, but I just don't see how the general fund can put a sewer system in and not put anybody on it. It's just not logical.
Discussion point we brought up during the master plan process, but I think for the projections Kevin did was more, there was an incremental increase. We have just under 940 customers on the sewer system right now. And I think you guys were projecting slightly less than that, sort of an organic growth, but not the big neighborhoods coming in. The three neighborhoods that we have dry sewers in.
One of the major problems with the town is overexpansion and under customers. That when you spend money, you've got to have a revenue coming in and customers to cover that cost.
Yeah. So again, what we're suggesting with this rate study is that we're really only, as far as like rates to adopt, only looking at 2 to 3 years because things are changing. We went out the 10 years to get an idea of how things might look on a long term. But with the way we keep changing on a daily basis, when we come back the next time around, which in another 2 years or so on another rate study, numbers could information at the time.
So many assumptions that can change.
Yes.
Exactly.
A lot of assumptions here.
Yeah.
Not that you could do it any other way.
Right.
All right. So we will shift gears a little bit.
It's hard to see what that says.
No.
It says water. resources there.
Yeah.
Can't even see it on that screen. That one's with the no water research. Oh, it's on the wrong tab. Something happened.
Something happened, yes.
There might have been a link that broke.
Where the model, where it's saved.
I think if we focus on the other two models, that I think that should be fine.
The other two.
No. There's some links on the files that when we copied them over, I think it broke the links. Is this one? Yeah.
Yeah. Little.
Yeah.
Well, they're fooling with that. I shouldn't have said fooling. I was massaging the program. The 1127 is when when it really hits the fan. That's when the cutback's coming, in which our current
Mhm.
plans are based on a 25% cut, which means a cut in water. If we don't get new water, it means a cut in the amount of water that we can make available. Except that we have water banked that we can to cushion that time frame for several years, of which the interconnect project is absolute key, because we'll be trading our water stored somewhere we have no ability to get it. But with our deal with Phoenix and the interconnect, we'll be able to trade water and move water around, and be connected with the larger system in Maricopa County, which is very timely given the fact that there's a big water cut coming at us.
In fact, Mary, you said it earlier, but I think we can go 5 to 7 years
Is that-
with that amount based on some of the deals that Sean has been negotiating and Brad Hill on our behalf with other cities. But the Phoenix Interconnect is going to be a crucial element to that to be able to get the water to us. CAP Canal to the interconnect. So
I think you were shooting for April, but there was some question on that. Is there any update on when that's going to actually be turned over to us?
The water exchange agreement, Mayor, yeah,
Well, no, the
No.
interconnect project.
oh, it's actually June, June 16th is when substantial completion occurs. So we'll be testing it. So we're waiting for the motor control center, which is the last piece of equipment to be delivered, and that's what's driving the schedule. So everything should be done, tested, and we're handed the keys June 16th right now.
How about our check from the feds? Any sign of it? Our check for the $2 million.
We actually have to get back to that and do that application. We've got the application. We've been told to do it. We just have to start working with staff and actually start submitting it. We're actually, we requested it's one specific line item. So we have about $700,000 that we can ask for reimbursement. So we're going to work with staff to start that process. It'll be through the next summer before we get through the full 2 millions of that grant, because they tied it to just the electrical installation line item.
but the logger jam has been undone.
It has.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's good to know.
Yeah, we've been drowning.
We've been what?
We've been drowning
Drowning.
in finance with all these projects and everything. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have not had the opportunity to find out what the process is for this particular grant on how they want the reimbursement request done. So,
As long as we don't lose the opportunity to get.
oh, we won't.
Yeah.
No, at this point, they have awarded it to us. We have it all figured out. It's just a matter of, we have a portion that we could draw down as soon as we have the opportunity to start.
Okay, we're back. So before we get too much into this, we'd ask the question before if rates had to go up to cover the 483,000 subsidy. Your revenue would be a $2.4 increase in rates would have been equivalent to about a 40% increase in the rates in order to eliminate that general fund subsidy that was last year.
Now, we took money out. So taking the money into the open space fund increased the amount subsidy, is that correct?
No. So, the decision to not allocate to the water infrastructure fund, which is essentially feeds into the Cave Creek Water Fund, that's the reason why we need to replace that money that would have been coming in with general fund subsidies
Yeah.
until rates are high enough to be self-supporting.
Yeah, okay. So that action made this worse as far as now the same dollars go in different places, but.
Exactly. Yeah. And we knew that at the time. We talked about that of eliminating that dedication and putting it in general fund still meant general fund was going to have to still give it back to Cave Creek Water. But it's a truer reflection of actually being a subsidy.
So what we have up is that first financial plan that we looked at, the Cave Creek water system with no water resources. So that's the 6% increases back to back, followed by the 5s and the 4s. So you can see up at the top here, this is our debt service coverage line item. So this is where it needs to be at least 1.2 times. So we're above the 1.2, we need to be there. This next line here is our end of year cash. So even with the general fund subsidy that we're showing for this current fiscal year, if everything goes to plan, the Cave Creek water system will have a fund balance of $150,000. That's compared to what we've set at our target, where we're targeting to have 3 months of operations and maintenance expense in reserve. So the 3 months of O&M is just shy of $1.2 million, $1,165,000. So with the general fund subsidy and the 6% increase, we're at $150,000 in fund balance. We're not meeting that target. Looking at the next year in 2027, we're still not meeting our target. We're at $551,000 there, $552,000, again, with a general fund subsidy. And it's not until 2028 where we meet our debt service coverage, or we meet our target reserve balance. And then as we go out through 2034, so we're right at the 1.21 times coverage 10 years out, which, as we've discussed, is a long way out. A lot of things can change between now and then. But at the same time, if we don't start putting in the rate increases today, if this plan comes to fruition as we have, there's going to be much more significant rate increases potentially in the future to hit that 1.2 times 10 years out. So we're trying to do our best prudent financial planning and looking at the long-term horizon, even though, as we've said, 2027 is not really in focus at this point in time, let alone 2033, 34. So you can see we are building a healthy fund balance by the time we get out there. Our operating reserves are going to be $7.76 million in 2033, 34. But at the same time, we're needing to raise rates in order to hit that 1.2 times debt service coverage, that legal obligation that the bondholders are going to have for us. So we're trying to do a balancing act of both maintaining adequate reserves without generating too many reserves and also meeting the debt service coverage. So in this case, it's the debt service coverage out in 2034 that's driving the rate increases.
We're charging people rates to put it in the bank to cover this debt service.
Effectively, yes.
Which
Yes.
This is
So,
way
so
out
when
there,
it-
but
yes, it is way out there, and I'll keep saying this. The things that are happening right now, it's a very dynamic environment. And so we had talked at the October 7th meeting, I forget, about the debt issuance for CIP projects, that we were doing those as excise tax revenue pledged. Our anticipation is that we will get to a point to where we're going to say, okay, well, we don't want to keep using excise tax money as our pledge. And for using just the rate revenue within the fund, then it's going to be that 1.2 times that we'd have to meet. So as things progress along and as we, decisions are made and things become more final, the decisions about how much is excise tax can change as opposed to rate revenue pledges.
Okay.
So if it's an excise tax pledge, then we don't have to be in this type
so we're
of
going to
situation.
financially engineer it, so we're not we're charging people and putting the money straight in the bank. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
Right, because it's the current year revenue, the times coverage is based off of current year revenue compared to current year debt service costs that you have to meet that 1.2 times, and how much money is in the bank doesn't count.
Cynthia, you had a comment or a question?
So we're to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My question actually was back a bit in the presentation about the water resource fee, when it said that would be added to existing rates. And a figure was presented, but it wasn't presented as a percent added on to those existing rates. And that was my question. What percent would that add to the scheduled 6% increase?
So the scenario of having the water resources in, so we kept that at the 6% increase of what the monthly rates were. The scenario we were saying we would add a separate fee that was $3.27 per thousand gallons.
7 cents per thousand.
So it's on top of, and it would just be a fixed rate is the way that it's calculated of the $3.27 per thousand gallons.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Hey, Cynthia, to your point, the very last page on page 32, when we have the colored bars there and the numbers there's a town by town comparison.
Yeah,
We don't-
yeah.
We don't
I
have
don't know
that
yet.
fee added on there, so that number is artificially low. because
There's a
of the
bar
addition
on,
of the fees.
there's a bar on there with it.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll get there.
okay.
Right now, we're just trying to look at the overall financial plan of what it takes to support the costs of the systems. And then we'll get into the actual rate structure after this.
Councilmember Friedman, do you have anything you'd like to add?
He may be muted.
Okay, go ahead and go on.
The other thing that I would point out here is, you can see between 2028 and 2029, the debt service coverage jumps from 1.77 to 2.48. So that's a reflection of the existing debt being paid off, which is why that debt service payment goes away. So the debt service coverage spikes up in that year, but then we're continuing to add debt in the future. So that 2.48 drops to 231, 216, et cetera, down the line. So then we've got the plan again here with this is with the water resources, the water resource capital projects included in, but no fee. So this is not the dedicated fee. So this is with that $11 million debt issuance in 2026 in order to cover that water resource fee. So that's why you don't see the debt service coverage numbers spike up quite as much, because we're adding that big debt right at the beginning here. We're again not meeting our debt service, or we're not meeting our cash reserve target in 2026. We're supplementing it with general fund loans or general fund subsidies in order to keep the fund balance positive in 2026. And then as we move out into the later years, it's a similar type story. We're trying to hit that 1.20 times debt service coverage. We're a little bit higher by the time we get to 2034, and that's causing our fund balance to increase. So we're increasing the fund balance, but we're raising rates in order to meet that debt service coverage target. And then
Blow it up a little bit.
Sherry, the 1.2 or 1.5, is that just WIFA loans, or is that the private placement loans and other options too? Or bonds? Is there a way around that other than just WIFA loans?
Yes, but the biggest way around it is doing the excise tax pledges. But that there's more flexibility there.
Say
We
that
do
again?
that. When we pledge our excise tax revenues for the debt payments, regardless of the type of debt, then the times coverage is not as high when you're relying on rate revenues. Regardless of the type of debt, you're likely going to see higher requirements, and some of them even higher than the 1.5 times.
Well, the other thing is, if we don't spend the capital, we don't have this problem, correct?
So
Problem.
so if we're not issuing the debt, which would
You don't-
go to
you don't
pay the
issue debt,
capital.
You don't have the problem. So we have got to get very efficient on putting projects in and spending money. And we've got to make sure that that every one of those meets a criteria. Again, this is 10 years. This is a long ways out, but the principle is the same.
And then, so this is the plan with the dedicated water resource fee. So this includes the $3.27 water resource fee that this plan anticipates would come into effect this current year. So our fund balance looks much better in the early years. It continues to grow throughout. So we've got a very high fund balance towards 2033, 34. But again, we're trying to meet this 1.2 times debt service coverage. So we're at 1.32. That's going to be the driving factor for the Cave Creek water system is the debt service coverage. That's what's really driving the financial plan over the 10-year horizon. In the immediate time frame, it's the cash reserves. We're not generating enough cash to meet our reserves. As we continue to add debt into the system to fund the capital need that we need to maintain and operate the system, it's the debt service coverage that's putting the pressure on the rate increases.
As Kevin had mentioned earlier, in each one of these scenarios, really the only difference was related to the water resource fee. So we didn't look at this and say, oh, okay, so let's play around in this scenario of assuming that we're not going to issue as much debt towards the end of the 10 years in this particular scenario, as opposed to some of the other scenarios that need it. Because then we're just changing too many variables in the comparison of how do things look.
This is very instructive, but this 10 years away, maybe we got to move on.
Right.
There, just one quick comment though, on the numbers that's there. That's less than what I think you estimated for the next 10 years, which was 40 million in specific infrastructure investments the town needs to make. And that doesn't count, of course, so much of your life is reacting to the system's failure.
I don't
doesn't
think that
really
was all in
estimate-
Cave Creek water, though.
What's that?
I don't think that was all in Cave Creek water.
You remember the figure, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, you remember the figure that we were trying to work with up here a few meetings back of things that were imminent, but we should start thinking a little bit longer term. And I thought we had a rough figure of 40 million. And I think that was inclusive of everything, the Hava Springs and any responsibility we have with that, and Carefree Ranch, south of Carefree Highway, all those investments.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the capital program. There's a couple of big things that are showing up in the next 10 years that we're budgeting. One is the second pipeline connection out past 40th Street to the west side of Cave Creek, the existing 8-inch line, and we proved that out with the when the Desert Hills wells were out, that that system is very much stressed. We have a single 8-inch line that's working above capacity. There's also a project in the 10-year CIP in the Cape Creek Water to upgrade the water treatment plant. Currently, our operational permit, we have to do some modifications to it by next fall with Maricopa County Environmental Services. But then we did program to actually replace the plant with a whole new membrane system. That's about $8 million. That shows up in the next 10 years. We may be able to push that out working with the county. At that point, the haul trailers will be close to 15 years old and they might be ready to be replaced. We might need to be thinking about that if we're still in the water treatment business. And there's some other large projects that are being looked at. We have got brought up in the master plan when we looked at all the pressure zones that we have. Pressure zones 9 or 8 and pressure zone 1 have a lot of deficient piping to even meet our residential fire standards of 500 gallons a minute. So we have to start replacing those pipelines. So that within the 10-year model, that starts to show up, and then that does become an issue. If we have to start to look, we have scrubbed some of that and pushed a lot of that out even to the second year, 5 years of the 10-year CIP, and then we push some of that further out. But yeah, looking just in Cave Creek Water right now, what we projected was about $45 million in improvements, largely the pipeline system improvements and the water treatment plant upgrade that we need to be planning for.
But I think a fair amount of that was when you looked at CIP, like
Yeah, this is the
5,
this
6
is the March
times.
15th. I think that's what's in the model right now.
Okay.
From the March 21st version.
No, we've changed things since then.
Oh, we did? There's another one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Couple,
Oh,
at least a couple times.
Oh, actually, there's a 610 version. That's 47. Yeah.
So we've moved over to the Desert Hills water system now. So again, we've got the 6% increases. The general fund loan that we're programmed into the Desert Hills model is to meet just get positive basically. So in 25-26, we've loaned enough money from the general fund so that there's $645 in the bank for the Desert Hills system. So we're trying to minimize how much of a general fund loan is required by the Desert Hills. As it gets up into the higher numbers in these early years where we are borrowing money, again, is to try and make sure that we're meeting debt service coverage and achieving those. So by the time we get out to 2034, we have healthy debt service coverage numbers. Our fund balance is a reasonable level. It approximates 3 months of operations and maintenance expense, and then we've got the loan is fully repaid by 2034. And then the final one is the Cave Creek wastewater system. So again, we're maintaining a positive fund balance. It is growing as we progress through the years. It's pretty lean in this first year here, $50,000 in the bank. It starts growing over time. You can see the debt service coverage that we have here. It's just above the 1.2 all the way through 2029. It starts to get a little bit higher in 2030, 2031, but then we're dropping back down to 2032, right at that 1.2 that we need to be at based on the additional debt that's being issued. So we have a positive fund balance at the end of 2034. Our debt service coverage is at a decent level. One of the things that we've looked at before on the wastewater side was how much rate revenue are we bringing in versus our O&M maintenance expenses. So as we have the plan developed right now, by the time we get to 2034, even with a 6% increase every year, our O&M expenses are $310,000 more than our revenue is. Yeah.
Even with the 6% increase?
Even with the 6% increase.
Tell me how that happens. What's the rationale behind that being in that situation? You'd think the 6% a year, you must be estimating higher than 6% a year O&M.
Yeah, well, so part of the issue is right now, So for 24-25, the rate revenue was $1.35 million and the O&M expense was 1.67. So that's the deficit that we've got there, and we're growing our O&M at 6%, or sorry, we're growing our rates at 6%. We're growing our O&M at 3% for the most part. Some expenses we've got going up more than 3%. So it is narrowing that gap a little bit, but the deficit was so large to begin with that it's just going to take that much longer to play catch up.
Okay. Ready to jump over to the rate structure?
I think maybe this is a good time to remind people that part of the challenge that we have here in Cape Creek is that we only have 4,400 customers. To spread all of our expenses out over a very small percentage of
Yeah.
people. Other towns and cities don't have this issue.
Right.
Most
Right.
others. I
Right.
mean, 4,400 customers is nothing.
Yeah,
So-
it's a very small system, so trying to achieve economies of scale is just really not very feasible.
And we have large lots, so, you know, getting water to all these people is much greater because we're on such larger lots.
Yeah, density can have an impact on the cost of the system where you don't have as far to travel.
Yeah.
When there's more density,
We love it.
but it's, yeah, exactly. It's part of who Cave Creek is.
There is a cost of living in a
Mhm.
low density, spread out, hilly with what, 10 or 11 pressure zones, a bunch. This is part of just the structure of the system.
And the maintenance that's required to have a 12.5 mile pipeline from CAP. You know, all of that has to be taken into consideration and people need to understand it. We're unique and we're paying for it. We pay to live in this community in many ways, and this is one. And it's worth it.
Yeah.
We all think so,
That's the
Uh-huh.
bottom line.
but these numbers are scary
Yeah.
for a reason.
Maybe the RFPs for the potential privatization of the water companies in the town can be a source of hope for the future. Because if you go and privatize the water, you get back into the core business of the town, which is land use development, code enforcement, and so forth. The initial purchase of the water company may not have been visionary, it was thought at the time, but it certainly seems to be financially absolutely unsustainable. 250 million already since the beginning. But it's an educational process. I'm not criticizing or not taking even really responsibility for the time I served before. But it just seems like government doesn't do as well as the private sector does because it has to account for profit and investment.
But I think if you look at Anthem, you know, they have the private sector and their water costs have just gone up tremendously.
Well, if we weren't subsidizing our water customers here, they wouldn't be able to afford the monthly bills. So I think the mayor's right. There's no way around
Yeah.
the lifestyle being subsidized without sufficient disclosure and without reflecting the actual cost of construction and maintenance. But I do think the RFPs, when they come back, if there's any interest, will offer an opportunity for some more review and discussion. At the very least, the desert operation up there, Desert Foothills Water Company, is an opportunity to take an incremental piece for analysis. And then, you know, others have made commitments up here, the mayor's had conversations, and Sean, that maybe in the future, we can work with the city of Phoenix and partner on wastewater, things like that. Probably other
Love to do
opportunities.
That's the golden fleece.
Yeah.
If that may happen, I mean, I don't have knowledge or analysis, but
We need help somewhere.
everything's relationship based,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
town has new relationships and a new manager and a lot of recent successes. So I know you can't factor it in on your flow chart, but it's a good effort or goal.
This is a good time to bring this up because I don't see this, I haven't seen the rates yet, but I presume there's no summer rate.
Correct.
We use 75% more water in July than we do in January. And I'm hoping when we see this, if we don't, I'm hoping the next version sees it. We really need to look at putting in a somewhat like a 4-month rate because of two reasons. One is because of the water shortage and to
Mhm.
conserve, but the second one is you don't have to build your equipment as built. Instead of having a 3,000 gallon, 3 million gallon a day water treatment, you can get away with 2 million.
Mhm.
So these rates really need to focus in on not only conservation, but getting that summertime peak shaved down. I don't know, I think half is over a long period of time, half is not unreasonable, especially given the situation with our CAP supplies.
You're
So,
not,
so
you're, oh, excuse me, I was just going to say, you're not too far off because we all see that on our either APS or SRP bills because it costs more, to produce the power during that time period. Because the higher production that we're having to do in the summertime, we're having to pay the higher peak rates for APS for our pumps and everything as well. So it makes sense to factor that into the rates, to have maybe a differential for summer.
Phoenix does that. I printed out a couple of the other cities around us. They have far fewer tiers,
Mhm.
and they all have a lifeline rate, 4,000 to 5,000. Or 2 of the 3 have it. One does not have it. But their rates are skyrocketing. Queen Creek, I think it's Gilbert, 100% increase.
Yeah.
one of the things with the way that we do have the tier structured and adding that 0 to 4,000 gallons. So people who were in that category of 0 to 10,000 and now are in a category of 0 to 4,000, they're not going to see the same level of rate increases, which essentially when you're trying to cover the cost of a system and you got to divide it amongst the customers in some manner. So then those who are using more are seeing a little bit more of the increase. Plus we did a factor to have those that are using more than the 50,000 gallons in a month was an even more elevated increase there. So the more water that you use in the summertime, you are kind of hitting a little bit of higher. But essentially what you're talking about is an even greater than what's being built into this.
So this is for the Cave Creek water system. So this is the monthly base charge. So going back to the earlier discussion, so these rates are designed to generate about 50% of the revenue to operate the system is going to come from this monthly base charge. The biggest change that we made on the monthly base charge is if you look under the current rate structure, there's a differential between a 5/8 to 1 inch meter and a 5/8 to 1 inch boosted meter. So when we had done the analysis previously, the incremental cost to provide service to those boosted customers was about $11 a month. As we redid the analysis this time, so you can see previously it was $61.69 to $72.69. Now it's $65.04 to $80.75. So the new analysis has shown that the cost to provide service to those boosted customers increased from about $11 a month to about $15 a month. So there's a refined boosted rate for the Cave Creek water system.
Mr. Mayor, Sherry, do you know the numbers, or Sean, the numbers of ratepayers in each of these categories, either numerically or by percentage?
I think in Cave Creek, it's under half. In Desert Hills, the way we set boosted rates, it's actually over half the customers. Like it's actually 2/3 in Desert Hills are charged boosted rate. In Cave Creek, it's about a third, if I remember correctly. It's everybody a boost above zone 7 off of our NERI who can't be directly fed off the NERI. So I think it's about 1/3 of the customers in Cave Creek.
Of course, the rationale is that you're pumping, the boosted rates, you're pumping twice.
Right.
Yeah.
One is at NERI, and then you have to bump it again to get it up a mountain somewhere.
So is it afraid of some of the electricity cost?
Power cost, maintenance cost, more equipment cost.
And we worked with Kevin to go through that. We went to each of the booster sites. We actually looked at 5 years worth of energy costs and then also volumetric use within that pressure zone. And we came up with a new factor. So in the 22 model, we started doing that work, but we didn't get it completed. So I endeavored and I was late in getting it done, but we got it done this year working with staff. So
Oh, good. That's a real improvement in the fairness of the system.
So then if we shift to the volume component, so again, this is going to generate 50% of your revenues. So you can see the new tiers that we have there, 0 to 4, 4 to 10, and then the 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 50, and over 50 remain unchanged from where they were at before. So we are proposing under this rate structure a little bit of a decrease for those customers using 0 to 4,000 gallons. So previously they would be charged $3.09 currently for each 1,000 gallons of water used between 0 and 4. We've got it dropping down to $2.39 effective this year. And that goes back to the discussion we had earlier with the balancing act. So we need to get so much revenue from the residential class. So the higher we make that first tier, the lower it makes that conservation tier, that over 50,000 gallons. So one of the options that we looked at was to keep that $0 to $4,000 at the $3.09 now, and then increase all the rates after that. The problem with doing that is the differential became so minuscule between the tiers that it almost eliminated the purpose of having tiers. If you're going from $3.09 in tier 1 to $3.12 in tier 2 and going up to $3.20 in tier 3. So we opted to lower that first tier to give a break for the lifeline rate in the 0 to 4, and then continue ramping up. And as Sherry said, make that over 50,000 a little bit more aggressive in terms of the rates that customers pay.
Well, these have a good conservation message in them, which is what we're looking for.
Right.
I just have a quick question. How many roughly do we have over 50,000 per month consumption?
Oh, I'd have to pull
Is
that
it
number up.
like a small number?
Cave Creek Water, it's almost 2% of the customers.
Over 50,000 a month?
Mhm.
These are residential customers over 50,000 a month
Correct.
Mhm.
in a desert?
Yes.
It's not desert by their houses.
No, they're not in a desert
No,
right
no.
now.
In Desert Hills, it's about 1.4% of the customers.
And they're paying some
Yes.
similar, 1750.
Yes.
But
Is-
that's only on the water over 50,000. So when you go up to 50,000, they're not
Right.
paying more than
Oh,
we do.
yeah,
It's only
yeah.
the water
Yes.
that's
Yes.
above and beyond.
Correct.
Right.
Well, maybe you need fewer, would it be a better conservation? I don't know, maybe I'll just, never mind, let's just proceed.
So then we've got commercial rates and common commercial irrigation. So again, the question came up before, are the rates different between the different classes? So the base charge is going to be the same, but on the volume side, it is a different rate depending upon what customer class you're in.
Do we have commercial irrigation in the 50,000 area?
I don't think you
Didn't
did
run-
those.
run that
you didn't
one.
do those numbers. I don't think there's even that many customers in those
No, there's
categories.
not.
Okay.
Yeah, in Cave Creek water, there's only, for irrigation customers, there's only 31 irrigation meters. And in Desert Hills, there's only actually one irrigation meter.
Well, what I like there is it costs more to irrigate, which it
Mhm.
should.
Mhm.
I mean, the irrigation should be expensive and,
Not essential.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, we have a situation where we have a lot of commercial customers that don't have a separate irrigation meter, so there's just one meter feeding the entire property, so it's hard for us to break that component out also. That goes back to when we set the sewer factors, when we talk about that later, we give some of the commercial customers a certain amount of volume of sewer use or water usage, as assumed it's outdoor water use. So because we most of our commercial customers do not have a separate irrigation meter.
And then the last one we have is the commercial pools. And then at the bottom, we've got that high level water resource rate that we talked about before, where the annual debt service on the $11.5 million at $1.14 million divided by the water sales comes up with our fee of $3.27 per 1,000 gallons.
You sure that's right? That seems really low.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm gonna calculate while you do it.
The engineer.
And then we've got Desert Hills, same concept, the monthly base charge. Again, you can see it's about a $10 difference right now, currently between the boosted and non-boosted. Again, based on the analysis that Sean undertook, that was reduced from $10 a month to a little bit under $2 a month on the Desert Hills side of things. So not as much impact to the boosted customers under the rates going forward based on the analysis of how much it actually costs to provide boosted service to those customers.
And that's largely dedicated or predicated by the fact that there's only a couple of sites out in Desert Hills feeding so many customers. So we divide it into the number of customers that are found out there. It's really the 14th Street, the 10th Joy Ranch, and the 10th Street boosters feed all those boosted customers. So it divided out much more equitably when we did it this way.
And then we've got the same type of presentation here for the Desert Hills residential customers. So a little bit of a decrease in the water use for 0 to 4 compared to what they're paying today, and then incrementally higher rates as we progress through the tiers. And then commercial, we've got again a different rate for the commercial customers as compared to the residential customers.
Yeah, I'm going to make an assertion.
Mhm.
I don't think that the commercial customers have the potential to save water the way that residential does because of the outdoor water use in pools and mainly irrigation and leaks therefrom. So I really think that the opportunity is in residential
Mhm.
outdoor. It's not in the commercial. They just don't have any potential the way somebody, if they, like my pool uses 2,000 gallons a month on average.
Mhm.
But it's like 4,000 in the summer and almost none in the winter in some months. So
The general philosophy on the non-residential side, specifically the commercial side, is businesses are in the business to make money. So they're going to try and conserve as many places that they can, water being one of the areas that they can cut back on their bill and be as efficient as they possibly can. Where it gets tricky is where Sean just said, where they don't have separate irrigation meters. They've got one meter that's serving whatever it is their business is, plus doing the irrigation. So in this case, there is a little bit more opportunity for them to conserve based on the fact that they don't have a separate irrigation meter. But yes. And then moving on to wastewater. So we're maintaining the existing rate structures we have today. So it's a residential flat charge. It's currently $89.77 a month. It would go to $95.24 a month. On the non-residential side, there's a monthly fee based on your meter size, and then depending upon the type of business you are, depending upon the assumed strength of the discharge that comes from your respective business or customer class, you pay different rates. So a restaurant has a higher discharge into the sewer system than a laundromat does or a service station. So we've got different rates that reflect the impact that each of these types of businesses is placing on the system. All right. So these are some examples.
Yeah, so I took real customers and looked at what their current bill is based off of their water usage compared to with these proposed rates. So I looked at one that was a very low usage customer. So they only used 2,400 gallons in the month. And so the base fee does go up, but their water usage fee, so it does go down because we created that 0 to 4,000 tier. And then I put what the taxes are and all that. So currently their bill would be $75.71 with that usage. The new bill would go up about 2% to $77.51. And then the water resource fee on top of it would be an additional $8 on top of the $77.51. I looked at what is kind of in the range of an average customer, which was over 13,000 gallons a month. And so you can see, like, we're calculating based off of how much of those gallons is in each one of those tiers. And under the current, their bill is not quite $120. In the proposed, it would go up to $126, which is a 6% increase, and the water resource fee would be an additional $44 on top of that. We looked at more on the higher end usage customer, 54,000 gallons of usage. Current bill at about $560 a month. And with the rate increases, it would go up to $603 for the month, which is an 8% increase for them. And the water resource fee would be an additional $177 per month. And we have people who are in a very high usage customer, and this is not even the highest customer. There are plenty that are higher than this, but we didn't want to go all the way up, like somewhere within the top 50 customers is essentially what we were looking at. So just under 200,000 gallons a month. Current bill, about $3,300. And the proposed with this would go up about $3,600, so a 10% increase. Plus the water resource fee would be an additional almost $650 for the month. Yeah. So we have a very big range, and when I was in Sedona, it was the same way. We had people that were using very, very small amounts and some that were using extreme amounts of water. So a large spectrum, and we're dealing with that here too. Oh, and then I did put at the bottom, so because the residential wastewater increases, it's a flat fee for residential, it's that 6% for the additional amount, and added $5 a month for that. Looking at Desert Hills, so on the low usage side, I found a customer that was about 2,800 gallons for the month, and there have been a lot of very significant rate increases for Desert Hills over the past few years because there was a lot of effort by council to try and get them closer to being self-supporting. So their bills are quite a bit higher. So for someone who's at 2,800 gallons, they're paying $112 a month. With the decrease in the base fee, this is someone who is on a boosted rate. So they're actually seeing a decrease in that. And then they're seeing a decrease because they're within the 0 to 4,000 gallons. Their total bill would go down to $104 a month, which would be a 7% decrease. The average use customer, so about 15,000 gallons. So they're paying not quite $200 currently, and it would be a very close to the same amount for them as well. Again, they have had very significant increases over the years. So that puts them at a little bit just base out close to flat on that. The high usage customer at 44,000 gallons, so currently paying about $640 a month, it would go up to about 600, close to 685, a 7% increase. And Desert Hills really doesn't have much in the way of the extreme usage on the high end. So the high end customers, that's about where they're at. Okay. As far as the rates that we charge Desert Hills, so we charge them for treating and delivering NIA water. And when we charge them for M&I water, we're actually selling them the water plus treating and delivering the M&I water. So currently we're charging $682 per 1,000
gallons.
Yeah, it was per 1,000 gallons, and $810 per 1,000 gallons for M&I water. The proposed increases, so we looked at the costs of cost to treat and deliver the water and the cost of what the cap water is when we sell them M&I. And so the proposed for NIA water would be $836 per 1,000 gallons, M&I water $978 per 1,000 gallons, and that's 23 and 21% increases in those. This is something where it was set and there was not an inflator on these, and so there's a little bit of catch up here in these rates. Okay, so here we have some comparisons. So we looked at other municipalities and other water systems that have been compared to in the past, and we did add a few others in here. So I don't believe Paradise Valley or Fountain Hills or Gilbert were in these before that we thought we should add those in. So you can see at the low end, so Scottsdale is the lowest for their water rates. This is assuming a 3/4 inch meter and use of 11,000 gallons a month. So that's about $48 a month. If you keep going over, so on those, the first several of the other systems, Scottsdale at the low end of 48, then going over to Fountain Hills at $74 a month. Then you get to Cave Creek's current bill at that 3/4 inch meter and the 11,000 gallons. So that's about $97. It would go up based off of what's proposed to about 101. And we're looking at, this is not including the taxes. This is just including what the rate costs would be. It is below what Carefree is at 118. Desert Hills currently would be $137 with the water resource fee. It is at about $137 for Cave Creek water. And then the proposed for Desert Hills goes up to 143. So it's a mighty big range where we're at compared to what's on the left side of the screen. And again, as I said, we're a very, very small system. And so trying to achieve the economies of scale that a bigger system can obtain, we're just not there.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
how much are taxes or all fees?
So there is the TPT tax, which would the combined between the state, county, and the town is 9.3%. And there's a ADEQ tax that's a lot more minor in the calculation.
So roughly 10%.
Mhm.
It's almost like your cell phone bill. If you look at your cell phone bill, a lot of the same taxes are on that.
Yeah, there's some federal
Yeah, that's right.
taxes and stuff like that on cell
So if you
phones.
take the number and add roughly 10% more, that would come close to actual.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
but that's not necessarily what the other entities are paying in their taxes.
Good point. They would be,
So that's why we were looking at the rate.
you look at without
Rates.
taxes because it's irrelevant based on jurisdiction.
Yeah, it varies.
Different.
Looking at the sewer rates. So again, these vary quite a bit. So on the low end, we've got Phoenix at about $15 a month, going all the way. So you've got gradually creeping up. You've got Glendale at $38 a month. You've got Gilbert at $62 a month. Paradise Valley at almost 80. Liberty Sewer at 88. Currently, Cave Creek is at almost 90, and with the proposed to be 95. And this example is based off of an assumption of 3,000 gallons of usage.
And that still doesn't pay. We still have to subsidize.
Correct. And that's true on this over here. So we're still having to loan money to Desert Hills, and we're still subsidizing Cave Creek water. So mentioned before, so I don't think we should be adopting anything more than the next 2 to 3 years in the rates. Maybe do 3 just to have some cushion there. And because there's just so much changing, and I really feel like we're going to have to come back again with another rate study. One of the things with this particular rate study that we said it was really kind of an update. So there are things that Kevin worked on as far as like updating certain of the assumptions and things like that. But it takes several months, even longer, to like download all of the customer data and the usage data and all of that and refine all that and scrub that data to something usable, that we relied on what the previous data was for that. So as things are changing and as water conservation programs are put into place and people's usage and behavior changes, then I think that possibly the next rate study might be when we want to look at doing that. And because as I said, it adds several months to the process of what's already a long process. it may be somewhat close to on the heels of when we finish this one. And then the other thing that I have here is the 2022 rate study. So council had adopted rates all the way through 2028. So essentially what we're suggesting is that we would rescind the 26 through 28 rates because we didn't do this as an assumption of if we had those rate increases and then what's an incremental increase on top of that. This was assuming those are just not there. What does it take? So when you're looking at the 6%, it's not on top of some rate that was previously adopted 3 years ago.
Mayor, what's the timetable on this? What does staff recommend for?
That's my next slide.
Yeah. Wow, that's good.
So, unless council is saying that you want some very significant change in the structure of what has been proposed, if there's not that, then we would be able to proceed with this type of timeline. If you're saying we really want to see like a lot of different other tiers or change some significant changes in the structure, we're not going to meet the first deadline here on this to be able to have the effective date February. So we're looking at the November 4th meeting is when we would come back. So typically, once we have settled on where we're going to be at, then Will Dan prepares an actual written report with all the various information in that. So they need time to be able to get that out. I think it's mostly Kevin. So November 4th for that, which means that we would have to post the intent and the written report on the website no later than November 7th. The public hearing and approval of the resolution would be at the January 6th meeting, which would put the effective date, and I know it seems odd, but the effective date as of February 9th, because the way that we have the cycles and when the readings are done, they're not done like on the 31st or on the 1st of the month. They're done around that 8th or 9th date.
Well, having been with Kevin in every one of these rate studies since, 2015 or 16, something like that,
In that time frame, yeah.
almost our 10-year anniversary.
Almost,
Yeah.
pretty close.
The structure of this looks just like the first one, the
It's-
second one, the third one.
Yeah.
And with the number of accounts that are above 50,000 and 40,000, it's not being effective in driving we've already got a very progressive structure that has not driven conservation. Does anybody disagree with that?
I think with some of the messaging, and we do have some escalation in there, but the initial round of when Kevin had done the calculations, and I'll go back to, so that very high usage customer, with the initial round of what we were looking at was going to be like a 50% increase. And I think you'd have an awful lot of people coming and complaining about adopting a rate structure like that. I think it wouldn't go over well at all.
How many votes do they have?
You would, even in the high usage customer,
Yeah, we gotta
you would
be-
see very, very substantial even in that as well. So you're really talking about an awful lot of.
But
of-
I
of
know that
people.
other places like Flagstaff, we talked with Brad about Flagstaff has, I think, 2 tiers.
They do, but they also have a very, they've had very restricted water resources for a number of years, and their jurisdiction knows that. And they have, I think it's 3 tiers that they have, and upper tiers is something like over 20,000 gallons is their top tier, and it's very
Yeah.
expensive, and they have
But
very little.
the point is that we've been unsuccessful driving conservation over this 10-year period that we've had these highly progressive rates. And we still got over 50,000 gallons a month. So something else has to happen.
Well,
We can't continue to have water's too expensive. And we don't even know we have the water, we have the backup water, but, and the other thing is shaving the summer off. I don't see anything here that tends to shave off summer and get people serious about irrigation conservation. Those are my two critiques of where we are right now. And I don't know that I don't know of a tier structure that would be better because we've already got one that should highly reward people who use less water.
If I can add a little color to that, because, you know, I've been here in 2020 and 2022 when we went through those exercises. We spent a lot of staff time during those timeframes, especially in 2020, because we actually implemented the rates in August, which was, you know, a mistake that we made. So we spent a lot of time with educating people, and I think we did see a drop in usage. People realized, and it hit their pocketbooks that first year in 2020, and especially in Desert Hills, if you recall, Council, I think it was a 50% rate increase that we went ahead with in Desert Hills. So I think we have seen it. It just has its run its course, or there's other things we need to be looking at. And we've had the conversations with the Utility Advisory Committee about what other conservation efforts we need to put out there, and really just educating people about the town's water resources. And, you know, while some people might not blink at a $3,600 a month water bill, it's more why are you using over half an acre foot of water a month? You know, what are you watering? What are you using that water for? And that's that education. I do think this last year, where we've got the Desert Hill or Cave Creek meters upgraded, we got away from having the Itron system. Now we're a full Neptune-based system, and we found a lot of failed meters we were under-reporting. So we've been talking to people as they've been seeing their bills and change out. We still often hear that conversation that, you know, you changed my meter out and my water bill went up. Well, it went up because we were under-reporting for years. Now we've actually were reporting it correctly. So that conversation is doing some job. I think we can do better, and I think that's part of the outreach projects that we want to start working on to really get that message.
Graph.
Yeah.
I'm serious. We need a graph that shows how much peaking we're getting in the summertime, and if it's not measured, it's not managed. So, and we need one that shows how well we've done. If that's the case, a yearly graph over the last 10 years should show some improvement. I don't know that it would.
Yeah, you know, we've been hit with a couple of things because, you know, ironically, you know, when the Carefree customers started disconnecting from the systems, at the same time, we also had a very long, hot summer. So, you know, our customers kept the peak up higher, and our usage for that year, when we lost 300 Desert Hill, our Carefree customers remained the same for that year because the customers made it up. That's the type of stuff we do look at as the operational group. We actually look at that monthly and see what's going on in the system. And it is somewhat been dependent on the longer summers we've had.
So we pulled up the graph that does show, so this is for Cave Creek Water Residential, as far as the different tiers and the percentage of customers that are in each of the tiers and the amount of water usage in total. So for instance, the 0 to 4,000 gallons, 34% of customers are in that category, but they only use 7% of the amount of water usage.
Yeah, and I think getting the word out and letting people know, yeah, you can afford to have all this water, but this is a community thing. We need to cut back. And that, for some people, that'll have more effect than just having to pay more money. They've got the money, but if they realize it's important to cut back on water, that's another consideration.
Mayor Morris?
Yes, go ahead, Cynthia. Go ahead.
My question is on the categories for the residential water use. It goes up by, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and then why does it go 30 to 50 as opposed to going 30 to 40 and making 40,000 gallons your cap?
Not a bad idea. Since 18% of your water is over 50,
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
So doing 30 to 40 and then greater than 40.
Greater than 40, yes.
How long does that take to do that kind of change?
I could get it done in half a day.
Thank you.
Yep, that's a very good idea. This little chart you have here where the water is being used is very
Mhm.
instructive.
Mhm.
20% of our water almost is greater than 50.
Mhm.
Big use.
There's your first target.
Mhm.
We have mirrored the same tiers with Desert Hills, so we could do the same thing there with theirs.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, I think that strengthens the message that high users, are going to pay that, and we've set the bar a little more definite for what's moderate use as opposed to high use.
Council, everybody ought to weigh in on what
Yeah.
they think we ought to be doing here.
Yeah, I've made the suggestion to staff that as the water bills go out, each customer realizes where they are. So, let the customers know. They can see their bill. But if we tell them, well, you're using twice as much water as the average customer, if that's a visual in the bill, I think that would be helpful because that helps them to realize where they are. They're not all that concerned about the money. Maybe other people are paying it. But if they realize, hey, you're using twice as much water as our average customer, that's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have talked about during my quarterly reports is some of the things that we've seen here and with the implementation that we're doing with our banking services of switching over to Wells Fargo is that there's a lot of things that we would like to do that Casella is just not capable of. And Casella is something that we are looking at at some point in the future. I can't even tell you when we would be able to take it on, but I was saying I think the utility billing module might be one that we might want to look at sooner rather than later to be able to do some of the things like that because we don't have that capability at this point in time.
Does the My 360, are we capable of doing it via that software program?
So they can look at some history comparisons, can't they?
It's more, they're, with my 360, it's comparing, to themselves. It's not comparing to others. So it's a good system for what it can provide. It's a lower cost system, but it's nice that we can provide, especially the triggers. But, we're trying to work with that vendor, see how much we can get out of it. What we might have to think about in the future, going away from my 360 if we want more, but, see how we can integrate together. But
Well, all I know is it alerted me recently that my water usage was above average. And it's concerning. I thought maybe I had a leak or whatever. So I had to call and find out what was going on. So it's very helpful to stay aware of your water usage through that program. Even if it doesn't compare against others, it shows you, right? It's self-education.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Before I make a comment, can I ask another question? Is the Cave Creek, is Rancho Manana Golf Course a water customer of the town? And if so, how would you define that, how it works? I mean, for those who don't know some of the history, we don't have to go through it, but
yeah.
I mean, are they the ratepayer?
Yeah, actually they are. You have Rancho Manana Resort itself actually is a domestic water customer. So there's several water meters around the property that get fed. And then the larger water use that they do is for the irrigation water for the golf course. That's based on an actual agreement as part of the water use agreement that extends out through 2049, where they get billed for if we send them the different water supplies. If we send them raw CAP water, they get charged a proportional share of our pumping cost to move that water up to them through the booster pump stations. If we send them effluent, they actually get charged for our treatment of the effluent and actually their share of the electrical cost to boost that water back up to the site. So it's quite an elaborate analysis we have to go through on a monthly basis with them. And their bill is just an example because I've actually had several conversations with them and looked at it in the last 5 years have probably tripled, if not more, just because of the raw cost of the water and our cost of sending it to them. So yeah, they've used to only annually see about $150,000 a year, and now I think they're getting close to they're over $300,000, if not more. So they had to build that into their budgets. But yeah, they are a water customer to the town. We do still have inefficiencies that we want to work with them on the delivery mechanism. We deliver it to the lakes. They only get billed per the contract on what they pull out of the lakes, and we know there's inefficiencies in that lake system. And we do want to continue to work with them on just their overall irrigation use on the golf course themselves. But when you compare them to other golf courses, they actually, the amount of turf and the amount of water that you use is actually less than a lot of other 18-hole golf courses. They actually have less turf area than a lot of the typical 18-hole golf course. So.
I had
Sean,
a
can you-
question, I just forgot it. Go ahead.
Can you give us a ballpark figure of where the water use in Rancho Manana would compare with the average golf course in the valley?
I know I've sat down with Andy and looked at some other golf courses. Yeah, they're probably 20% more efficient than say some of the other golf courses, like just in the surrounding area in Scottsdale and even south of us in Phoenix.
A lot
So
of it's the acreage.
yeah, they have less
Right,
acreage,
right.
they have less turf areas actually than the typical 18-hole golf course.
It's a short course
Yeah.
for us poor golfers.
Another question if I could. How much water currently ages out that we have to dispose of that's never actually consumed? Roughly.
So it's our flushing operations. It depends, our biggest operation where we have to flush the system out is the 12-inch water line that goes up Spur Cross Road and goes down there. I'm looking at the auto flusher. Just last week, we had to flush 33,000 gallons out of that line to keep the chlorine residual up. So that does factor into it. I think if the number, we're about under 2% of our water that we have to do flushing operations. Spur Cross is one. We actually have a couple of other locations where we actually have to monitor for water quality standards that we flush out. And I think we bring that forward when we actually do the quarterly updates, and it's running under 2% of the system. We have to flush out of the system. It's another inherent issue with the layout of our distribution system because we have long pipeline runs without much usage on it from a customer demand in a lot of cases, and we have to flush those areas, the dead end areas, to keep the water in compliance with water quality standards.
And then this quick question, how do you inform the ratepayers of the upcoming meetings and then I guess they're informed after the council takes action at that future meeting?
So the requirement for the posting of the rates, the notice of intent to increase, so there's that requirement. And then because it's a public hearing, or no, this one isn't this one a public hearing?
Mhm.
The other one, the one for
Do
the
we put anything in
bed
the-
taxes. Yeah, so we can put notices out there, but the resolution, the meeting announcements and all of that. But yeah, we could do something on the bill, something there'll be on the website.
In
And
2022, we actually did direct mailers also because a lot of customers who get the electronic bills, they never see like a document. And so we realized that. So we actually paid, it wasn't that much money to actually just send out a one-page flyer directly to the water customers. So they all got something directly. It's like $700, I think, to do that. It wasn't much.
I think there's a prospector newsletter coming out again in another month or two.
Cynthia, did you have something?
No, I'm fine right now. Thank you.
We got a lot of people watching this, and we have utility advisory committee people in the audience, so I'd like to invite them to give their take and just state your name for the minutes, but then let's get some reactions. And yeah, Bob, you want to lead off? We'll go counterclockwise. Come on up to the microphone, please.
Hi, this is Bob Anderson from the Water Advisory Committee.
Is it
couple of
on? Is it on, Bob?
Lights on.
Okay, yeah.
A couple of comments. First of all, about the debt servicing, as you're doing 1.2 times and generating surpluses, I would encourage us to take that extra money and maybe prepay some CIP, or else can we pay down the debt using those excesses in order to reduce the interest going forward?
So as we got to those future years, we would definitely be making decisions based off of some of that. It's just for consistency in the different models. We left them all consistently the same as far as those assumptions. But yes, as we would get to that point in time, we would be evaluating and looking at that.
Okay, good. The second thing I was going to comment about, I think Cynthia might have mentioned earlier about the upward tiers. I would propose adding extra tiers and increasing the rates for the over 40, over 50, and maybe over 70,000 gallons per month. And taking those extra monies and putting them into kind of a reserve fund that would go out and actually pay or look to pay for additional resources going forward. Kind of a prospecting fee. So I don't think that, I'm not sure if we're bound by any regulations as far as break even, but could they be increased to create a reserve that would be especially directed towards another activity, water related, seeking new water resources in the future?
Yes.
So
Yes, what, it's.
my 2 cents worth.
We could do that.
No, we could do that as long as it's something related to Cave Creek water or Desert Hills water or wastewater within that particular fund. Then, yeah, or it can pay for any valid expenditure of that particular utility.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
those are my comments.
Good evening, William Sullivan, also on the Water Utilities Advisory Committee. This is the first time we've seen this, so we're acting, we're gonna meet at the end of the month, hopefully, and we'll discuss a little bit of the group. And hopefully we'll be able to get back to you before you act, at least by memo form, or be there and present what our position
Well,
is.
I think you ought to plan on having whoever, a representative come in and advise the council. I mean, that's one of your roles, is to
Okay.
advise the council at the hearings and the official times that we do that.
Yeah, we'll try to do that. Again, if we have a position to, can't tell you whether we'll have one or not, but if we do. A couple of things. I like the factor about changing the tiers and maybe adding a couple. I think those are good suggestions. I think summer winter differential, if it's warranted on the usage, is something, if not this time, maybe in the next rate case, it could be looked at very seriously. I think it's a way to address it. It always, when you're looking at this much of a rate increase for this long of a period, to have a segment that goes down as much as we're proposing in that 0 to 4,000 seems a little bit much. That should try to balance that a little better than what they've done, because it's a pretty significant decrease that they're going to see in that first tier than what they're seeing today. And that just doesn't seem quite right if you deal with it. What I would think you would end up doing is benefiting the middle user a little bit more and still hitting the tail, because that's where you're really trying to hit. But you run through it anyway, so everybody benefits on that lower decrease. I mean, everybody who uses 12,000 gallon gets the benefit of the lower rate there too. But it does seem like especially where you have some people who aren't around year round, that they get a windfall for those few months that they're not here and aren't using much water. It's, they just get a very low water bill. So those are just some of the things we'll be talking about it and come back with you with committee recommendations. Hopefully.
Good,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor.
you.
So I would like to say that part of what we were thinking about with that 0 to 4,000 as a lifeline tier, when we have people that are on fixed incomes who don't use a lot of water because they can't afford to use a lot of water, and we get complaints from them about how high the bills are. So it was also supposed to help them too.
Yeah, most places call this a lifeline, and I don't think we want Cave Creek to be all rich people. I think we need a balance of people throughout the town, and so I support the lower rate and almost all of the towns around us have something like that to keep people that can't afford it, so they don't have to move out of town because they can't afford the water bill.
Hi, I'm Carol Kepler. I think all these numbers kind of a lot. It's a lot to take in, this information. I think we got some great ideas about adding to our conservation ideas that possibly our committee can help the town with. I like the idea of putting something in the bill or telling customers kind of where they're at. That last couple graphs that we saw were very informative to kind of show, like, wow, the 50,000 people are using so much more water. It's like, we do have to address that. But I look forward to it and thank you for all that information.
Thank you. Thank you for helping us out. Okay, let's hear, can we get some audience, in the audience would like to come up for a 3-minute, shot at
Howard.
David?
David
David's got a coat on. That's the first coat I've seen since, I guess, last March.
Getting the ice out tonight. Yeah. Yeah, so in reviewing the document, I was really perplexed as to whether the 4455 shown on page 19 was a yearly cost or a monthly cost. I think in all fairness, what you should be saying on that slide on the residential examples is it's really not the total water bill where you have it stated, it's the subtotal of the water bill. And you should go ahead and add the water resource fee and create a total water bill below that. Because that kind of gets you to where you really are with our new proposed rate structure. That being said, I think we are going to be number one in the valley. We're going to be the highest water rates, sewer rates in the valley. I think there are alternatives that are reasonable. They're right in front of you. I really hope you pursue at least a good look at. It's time to release this complexity. The resources that are sucked out of this town for the utilities is just unending. How much finance spends on it. Of course, the utility people you would expect to spend on it, but our town manager, your time. I think this has just become the overwhelming albatross. And with the water rate cuts, I don't mean to be pessimistic, I mean to be real. Look at all the rain we just got. Do you think a drop of it got to where we needed to get it to fill it into Lake Powell? When it left Arizona, all that beautiful rain that just came through. Did you watch the rain flow just south of 70? No, it didn't make it. We probably didn't get a drop into Lake Powell out of that, sadly. And every drop we use here, it comes from Lake Powell. So I would urge you guys to expedite. If you're going to have somebody look at being a buyer of us, the sooner you do that, the better we're going to be as ratepayers. Because if you wait until one of the other approaches that we're talking about using, other than the banked water, and that comes with a fee, fees yet to be set, I believe, we end up having a dependency on groundwater wells that we don't know what the effects are going to be to the existing groundwater customers. And we don't know about the processes that it's going to take to utilize those groundwater wells. And I really think that instead of continuing the more money subsidy, I mean, what we're saying to the state of Arizona, if we take this budget down, is we're planning on continuing the general fund subsidies 10 years out. But we're making a good faith effort of getting off those general fund subsidies. You really can't have it both ways. You're either working towards it and you're going to do it, or you're not. And in all cases, we're not getting off the subsidies in 10 years. And I think these numbers are very optimistic. And I think there's been some clarity to the CIP where those are placeholder numbers. They're not actually accurate estimates. And all these issues could be owned by somebody else, somebody with a greater rate base who has greater capital to bring to this issue. They have a $2 billion budget. They don't have a $57 million budget. These are the kind of enterprises that need to be looking at this system to really help us get to the next, 10, 15, 20 years for those of us optimistic enough to think we're going to be here that long. So I thank you for your patience. A lot of really good information, but I think it's more information convincing me that the sooner we get rid of the utilities, somebody who does it, and that's all they do, the better off this town will be. Because then we can essentially, this year alone, we would have $5 million, $4 to $5 million increase in our general fund balance just because of the lack of subsidy to the utilities. It's insanity. You continue subsidizing the sewer, a couple million a year. You got $30 million worth of subsidy on there. So thank you for your patience, folks.
Others in the room? Okay, anything else, Sherry?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I just wanted to add to everything. So the November 4th meeting to approve the notice of intent and the posting and the written report. That's kind of the start of the timeline in order to have rate increases effective in February. You could always say by the time that you're approving the rates in January that you don't want to increase the rates that much as what you posted. If you want, you can always do that decrease, but you cannot increase over what was posted. So whatever's posted needs to be as much as you think that you might want to do, because if you change your mind and say, you know what, we really want to add another fee, increase this cost more than what we have, anything along those lines, then we're looking at pushing out the date of when the rates would be effective. The other thing that I wanted to say is Kevin has been great. I've worked with him in the past when I was in Sedona. And so I know how great he is and everything that he does to get this done. And even like last minute tweaks of, oh, Kevin, I think we need to change this factor or that factor. And he just gets it done, cranks it out. So Kevin is really great to work with and very knowledgeable on all of this. This is what he does. So very much appreciate him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Any last comments from council? Well, I want to congratulate
Yeah.
staff and Kevin. We've worked together for
Long
a while.
time.
Yeah, long
Almost
time.
10 years.
So, but I think this is good work. It really frames the issues. I mean, we got to get a hold of capital costs for driving those rates up in those outer years, and the form of financing. We need to financially engineer that. We really need. I'm looking for some ideas on summertime shaving. That is the key to keeping those capital costs down, because instead of building 3,000 GPM a day or 3 million GPM a day, if we got down to 2, we could just open the valve to Phoenix maybe. So, okay. Anybody else agree? Do you have anything?
No, I don't. That was a very good presentation.
Okay. Thanks everybody who was here today and participated, or if you didn't participate, thanks for being here, and seeing no further business, meeting adjourned.